Hello, I am Pastor Jeff Zender of Fairview Reformed Presbyterian Church in Ohioville, Pennsylvania, on the western side of Pennsylvania. And I'm here to talk to you about the subject of friendship. This past Sunday, I gave a sermon from Genesis 2:18, where we learn something from God of something that was written 3,500 years ago that even up till today people are learning again, reconfirming the truth of. And the truth is this: Genesis 2:18 says, "It is not good that the man should be alone." And so the whole sermon that I was giving before talking about marriage, which is where it goes eventually, is that God did not make us, man or woman, to be completely solitary in life. You may go through seasons that and times that you need solitary time. That's not what I'm talking about. But that we need other people. Some people feel that every day, and some people feel it every week or every 3 months. But at some point in life, we do need others to help us up. But one thing I was not able to really focus on that I was looking forward to talking about is a subject that the Bible talks about, and that's the subject of friendship. It's one of many relationships in the Bible, and the book of Proverbs in particular gives us information on the subject of friendship. Now, we live in a culture that has a great poverty of understanding on the subject of friendship. We live in isolation many times in our culture, and especially now when we're forcibly stuck in our homes in many ways, and we're not seeing the people that we love, not even our family, but obviously not also those who are our friends. But one thing I have to ask of you is, do you understand what friendship is? Do you want to understand what friendship is? And are you the type of friend that you could say is a good friend? You might think you are, but maybe there's more information to that. Maybe you want to be a good friend. Well, I've called this, you could call it my masterclass on friendship. That word's being thrown around a lot these days. And you know, Steph Curry for the Golden State Warriors, he has a master class on shooting the basketball. And I figure, he's pretty good at shooting. So at least maybe I could have a little master class on the subject of friendship. Now, this doesn't mean I'm the master of friendship. No, we're all pretty rotten at being friends at times. But it means I can go to the masters and give you the master class from the master. And who's the master? God himself. God gave us his word, and he gives us wisdom. One thing I love about the scriptures, and I've always adored about the scriptures, especially in comparison to other books, is that the Bible has so much variety of authors and styles. It's written in narratives and in law codes and in poetry and in apocalyptic prophecy, and yet here we have just simple wisdom books about how to live your life in the best way possible. Well, I'm gleaning this from one of the reasons I wanted to give it to you is because I found this gem of information from some of the research I did for last Sunday's sermon. I went digging through my old seminary books and just found this four-part information from a professor that I really appreciated in seminary. His name is Dr. Jack Collins. Now you might ask, well, who is Jack Collins? Well, he goes by C. John Collins. He was one of our Old Testament professors. Now, many of you might be familiar with the ESV Bible, English Standard Version of the Bible. Here it is, a big one. And if you have one of these study Bibles, you can find out that Dr. Jack Collins is right here where my index finger is. He is the Old Testament editor for the whole translation of your English Standard Version Bible. So he has a little bit of a piece to play, and he also did the information for the book of Psalms in the Bible. Well, Dr. Collins was a fine lecturer when I was at seminary, and he's also a really great writer. I love terse writing that's both brief and deep, and Dr. Collins is very good at being efficient with his words, unlike some of us preachers. But we have another job, a different kind of job of teaching than our professors do. But in his notes, he gives he goes through the book of Proverbs. And the book of Proverbs is a book of how to live life, the skill in the art of godly living, as Dr. Collins would say. And in the book of Proverbs, we see lots of couplets telling us wise sayings about how to live life. And it covers a wide range of subjects. And one of those subjects is the subject of friendship. And so as I was paging through my notes, I saw this 4-part characteristics of good friendship that the book of Proverbs teaches us. And so what does it have to say? Before we get there, we need to define what friendship is. Well, what is friendship? My working definition of friendship is this: that friendship is a mutually chosen, loyal relationship. It's a mutually chosen, loyal relationship, meaning it's really one of the only relationships that's driven almost purely by choice. If you don't want to be a friend, you leave. But it's not the same way with neighbors. You're stuck with your neighbors for good or for ill. But your coworkers, I mean, you can choose different jobs. But friendship itself, even marriages, I'll say, even some marriages are prearranged. But friendship is the only one that's purely chosen. Which means before we get into everything, you can't force a friendship. It must develop. You might desire somebody to be a friend, but if they don't desire it back, it just simply won't work. Or they may desire your friendship, but if it doesn't fit for you, then it just doesn't work as a friendship. It must be mutually chosen. C.S. Lewis writes on the subject of friendship, and in his book, The Four Loves, right here. And in the book, he talks about how shared interests can spark a friendship. He says this: friendship is born at that moment when one man says to another, "What? You too? I thought that no one but myself, ... Meaning two people discover they have a shared interest, and this starts to unite them, just as it united Jack Lewis to J.R.R. Tolkien and the Inklings. But I have to add something to that. Some friendships are not built just upon shared interests. Some are built upon shared experience. Maybe growing up, maybe time in war or time in school, and you developed just all this shared time together. And you may not have normally been the best friends in the world, but shared experience can do that. I have a twin brother, and my twin and I are quite different from when we were little kids. He's a lot more hands-on, and I've always been a lot more into reading and books and studying and that kind of thing. And yet, he was my best man in my wedding, partially because we had so much time together, and we still remain close today. And yet we don't have a lot of shared interests, not naturally, but just a lot of shared experience. And so maybe you will find friendships through shared interests or through shared experiences. Either way, great. But what does the Bible say about these mutually chosen, loyal relationships? Well, before getting into the 4 traits, the Bible tells us in the book of Proverbs that friends must be chosen wisely. Friends must be chosen wisely. So choose wisely. Why is this so important? Proverbs 22, verses 24 to 25 says this: "Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare." Make no friendship with a man who is given to anger and wrathful, meaning somebody who lacks self-control over his emotions on a regular basis, choosing wrath and wrath and wrath. If you connect yourself to somebody like that, which you're free to choose that on a basic level, yet if you do, what will happen? You will start to find yourself ensnared in his ways or her ways. But it says it a little bit more positively from Proverbs 13, verse 20. Proverbs 13, verse 20 says this: Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. So that's a little bit more positive. If you walk with the wise, you'll become wise. But if you're a companion with fools, you'll suffer. What is this saying? Well, I had a business friend of mine who he used to say that he always heard that if you want to be a millionaire, you need to hang out with millionaires. Meaning you got to hang out with them and hear how they talk, the decisions they make, the way that they conduct their daily lives, so that you can absorb and imbibe that way of thinking to become a millionaire yourself. Well, even more so, I say, as it relates to a person of character. If you want to be a person of character, and I hope you do, hang around the people who are millionaires in character, you could say, in the sense that they just have just great character. Because if you hang around those, and those are the wise people that you choose, those are the people that you choose, they will rub off on you, and your good qualities can rub off on them. So friends must be chosen wisely. And for believers, I'm actually quoting this directly from Dr. Collins' notes. Your closest friendships must be grounded in mutual commitment to the Lord. Your closest friendships must be grounded in mutual commitment to the Lord. I had a friend one time who started to get involved in other ways of thinking outside of Christianity, and it kept increasing. And eventually, we kept hanging out and talking. And one time I was at his house, and I thought it was a pretty courageous and very, very vulnerable question to ask, but he did ask me, why don't you ask me for advice in your life anymore? And I had to think about it and tell him. Well, I told him, first I did think it was a very courageous question to ask, but I had to tell him that I wasn't confident we believed the same anymore. His way of thinking, his first commitments of the way he thinks and approaches life had started to change. And therefore, I couldn't open myself up and ask him about his advice on finding a girl, or talking about the deeper questions of life and the future that I desire for my life. Because if he doesn't share those first commitments, then I can't open my heart to that. And so it is that your closest friendships must be grounded in mutual commitment to the Lord for believers. All right, so we must choose wisely. Well, now in the rest of this, I have time today for one of the 4 traits. And let's look at just the first trait of the 4 in Proverbs. What does it teach us about a good, biblically good friend? A friend is this, one who has this characteristic. That's a Y, but it's constancy. Constancy. Which is to say, a fair weather friend is not a friend. Constancy, my grandmother's name was Constance, and it means you're always there. It's constant, it's loyal, it's steadfast. A good friend is one who is constant. And Proverbs 14 verse 20 says this in an indirect way. It says, the poor is disliked even by his neighbor, but the rich has many friends. Did you get that? Now you might say, that doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right if you think it's a prescription for how to live, but it's not. It's not a prescription to say that, the rich get many friends. It's a description of how life is. The poor is disliked even by his neighbor, but the rich person has many friends. It's saying rich people have lots of friends. Why? Because they're trying to get something from them. They get to benefit from the rich man. And so they have more friends. But the Bible is saying through that indirectly that a true friend isn't like that. For a true friend, it doesn't matter whether you're a time of rich and wealth, whether you're talented or whether you're not talented or poor. A friend sticks. And so it leads us to Proverbs 18, verse 24, which says, a man of many companions may come to ruin. And I love this. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. It makes me think of some of you who've maybe been in conflict or on a team, or you've gone through some hardship, and you know who your friends are when everyone else falls away or when you suffer hardship. And who's the one who gives you a call? Who's the one who checks up on you? That's not a fair weather friend. That's a true biblical friend because they're constant. You see, some people have 2,500 friends on Facebook. And yet, I know people like this who have lots of friends, like associates, very social people, but if you ask them, very few of them are very close friends. There are celebrities that have 3 million fans or more, and yet who's going to be there to help them, honestly, not looking for any handout or help when they're stuck in a ditch? It makes me think of the Apostle Peter, right? Jesus was attracting crowds, and at that time the Apostle Peter was saying, I would die for you. And yet when Jesus turned from public hero to public criminal, when he was put up on a cross for everyone to see, in a public shame, and nobody wanted to be associated with him, do you remember how Peter responded? A little girl asked him, well, weren't you close to Jesus? And Peter denied that he had a connection to Jesus 3 times. You see, we're like Peter. We are fair weather friends. We're not as constant and loyal as we think we are. And yet, so we need somebody who's more loyal to us than we are to others. And we'll get to that later. But you got to ask then, and I'll ask through the rest of these too, if this is a subject of friendship, constancy, then what is not a friendship? A friendship is not these things. And I've said them a little bit already. Friendship is not a fair weather friend, somebody who's just there in the good times. A friendship is not benefit-based friend, who's there just for what he can get out of you or she can get out of you. A friendship is not a friendship whenever I want it. You know, some people are saying, oh, I'm close to them, but they're not really. They just get up and move whenever they want to. But a friendship's not like that. Friendship, according to Proverbs, is constancy without condition. Constancy without condition. And nobody I could think of in literature exemplified this more than J.R.R. Tolkien's character Sam Gamgee. Maybe you remember the story, but what a character he is. He's probably the least, the lowest on the totem pole of who you'd think would be the hero, and yet it's through him that the world is saved. But Sam Gamgee's one goal in life was this: Frodo. That's it. His devotion to Frodo. Sam Gamgee was a 3.5-foot hobbit who would have loved more than anything to go be back in the Shire, just hanging out, spending birthdays with his friends, eating rabbit stew well seasoned. And yet he was willing and even glad to endure danger and discomfort. For what purpose? Purely to stick to Frodo. There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And sadly, there's a poverty of understanding of that in our culture, particularly after the movie was made. And I heard people reflecting on it. And it's as though people did not have the category for that kind of friendship. And so they just assumed then that Sam Gamgee's character and Frodo, they must have been romantically involved. My response to that, it was pity. Pity that somebody must not have had that kind of experience of such a close friendship that had no romantic connection, that they would have to assume that the only category that they had for that was that they were romantically connected. But that's not the way Tolkien wrote it. He was a loyal friend, as though to show us what a loyalty could look like. And so the first characteristic is that of constancy. Stay tuned. I'll have another video where we'll look through the last 3. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And I hope to see you again. God bless.